Coding for Beginners by Pratik.
Hi everyone, my name is Pratik and I am from grade 3B at Treamis International School, Bengaluru, Electronic City. And today I am going to show you how to program in Scratch and Python. Scratch is a beginner-friendly programming language and Scratch is a very easy programming language. And Python is a very powerful programming language. You can code because your whole life you have been coding from giving instructions. And you have been giving instructions like to your parents asking a request to give you water, like you say your parents to give you water and they bring you water. And you have been coding your whole life. And in computer programming, you are giving instructions to the computer like when the program starts, move 10 steps and after that turn 15 degrees right, and it does it like a command. Here are two fun facts about computer programming. The meaning of code is the act of giving instructions to a computer. An algorithm means a set of instructions for a computer to follow, like for example, your parents say to go down and eat breakfast and you go down to eat breakfast.
Okay, let's code some Python. Now before you can run Python, you have to install it on your machine. So feel free to skip ahead if you have already have Python installed. Actually, we are going to download Python and install a programming language called IDLE, which is the development environment for Python. Let me walk through on how to download the official source, and Python's available for free on Mac OS and Windows, as well as some other platforms. I'll be demonstrating it on Mac OS because I have a MacBook Pro. Let's search for Python and simply navigate it directly to python.org in the Google search box. This is the official source from the Python Software Foundation, and the path and documentation is available here as well. On the home page, go ahead and click on the download button. Now, and you may give it a permission to download. You can see that my download has started and is finished. Python has been successfully installed on my machine now, hopefully yours too. Now go ahead and look for a program on your system called IDLE. As I mentioned, IDLE is dedicated development environment. Once you have located the IDLE program, go ahead and run it. And I will start mine now. Okay, so when IDLE loads, the first windows that you will see is called Python shell. This is what Python shell looks like, as you can see here on my Mac, and it may look slightly different on your computer because you may be on a different version of Python, a different operating system. A shell is simply a program that follows written instructions. A shell can be thought of as the way to interact with the program directly. So let's see what code we can give to Python and input that and execute the code. See Python's output in this shell. Let's write our first line of our code. Okay, so just like a human language, Like English or French, every coding language has a set of rules. We call this language's syntax. In generally, the syntax describes what you can do and can't do with the language, and more specifically, the exact rules for to do certain things. For example, Python can print out the output to the console. The Python syntax coding, this is a print keyword, print followed by the set bracket and opening and closing bracket, and Python syntax says like we have to use rounded ones and not square bracket, which might look like a square. We can do things by coding text, wrapping it in a quote and or double marks and placing it inside the bracket in the print statement. For example, we can code hello world, wrap it into the quote, mark it so you can see of another opening and closing. The quote and the text, it's green because it is the code is correct, and we now have the correct syntax for printing the output for the console. You're definitely going to learn some Scratch and Python, so you have written a line of a Python code. That's the input showing make executed well. Let's do that here in the shell. As we all know, double tap or return or enter. Python has printed our text dialog to the console hello world part, and syntax also says that we can use single quotes rather than double quotes for text dialogues like this one. So for example, we say print and use single quotes for our string hello world, and we hit return and it runs the same word you written, hello world. I'm sure that we are also code something like this, like name equals, and let's type our own name Pratik, not forgetting to wrap that in quote marks so you can code my name as Pratik. If we hit enter now or return with telling Python to store our name, let's go ahead and hit that. And straight we go to a new command line, and we don't ask Python to print any output, so it didn't. It stored in our name in the background. Code will only do exactly what you tell it to, no more less. So let's print our name. We are printing our stored name and use Python to do math. How about we code 2 plus 2 and hit return and in Python, and it runs the code performing the calculation and automatically this time outputting the result into the console. That's the syntax surrounding the use of arithmetic expressions like 2 plus 2. Of course, we could also say the number 2 is equal to. We could store that by hitting return and the code number plus number that run the code, and we get the same result for because number here is referring to the number we have already saved inside the number, which happens to be in the number 2. And Python numbers like this don't need to have quote marks.
So far we have been doing very simple code, running one command at a time directly in idle shell. What if we want to do something a little more complex, required multiple lines of code? We don't have to directly code in the shell. Let's use a file instead.
Click up here on the file menu and new file. And now Idle has created a new blank file by default. So let's write a line of code and save it to the file. Let's code another print statement, and this time there our code marks. We are printing text string, and let's say hello, my name is Pratik, Python programmer, and let's save our file. So we can click on the file and save it. Let's give our Python file a name. Let's call it pratik.py. Pratik.py file extension tells the system that this is now a Python file. Okay, let's save it, and there we go. We have got them a Python file ready to run. Click on the run module of course you can hit F5 as a shortcut to run your code file. And there we go. Python ran the file, read, executed our Python code. And here's some output in the console. What we have here is Python file, and this contains Python code. We have lots of code. We might call this as a program. If it was small program, perhaps just a part of a program, we might call it this a Python script. Alright, so back to our coding adventure. We just code Python to introduce itself. So how about we write some code to reply Python syntax gives us another key to for this we can code, and write this below as a second line input, opening and closing brackets. The input function, as it's called, allows the user to type an input in the shell or console and store it. The syntax also says that we can code a string between the brackets. So we can give the user a little dialogue by saying something like, "What's your name?" ? And we can get this line into code and it's run from top to down. Python will automatically print the string to the dialog to the console and wait for us for the user's input. Here's what it looks like. I'll go ahead and save and run, and you can see what we know. Run both lines of code, and Python is asking what's your name. Perfect. So what happens if the user enters a name here and into the console? Well, we can do is store it somewhere so that we can use it later on our code, and we have just done that. So let's code the same thing right again. It's code name equal to, and let's put a name equal to whatever the Python it gives and us as a user input when Python asks the question. So now in this second line of code, we'll run and ask the user for their name and wait for their response. Store the response name, of course. Once print name and it is stored successfully, we can go ahead and print it. Python won't automatically do that unless we tell it to. So to test our code, be sure that we are collecting like the name properly. Let's code another print statement just like we have done before. And again, we can print our name without the quote marks at this time. Great stuff. So let's save and run our code, our script on module, and let's test our code. Now asking what is your name. Let's go ahead and enter a name. I use my real name Pratik. Pratik, hit enter and Python prints my name. Well, how about we write a little code to make a decision based on the input. We could check the name that we entered and write some code for Pratik to say something like that's a great name, and if we give it a Pratik.py, our real name, and if we say give another input Pratik.py, it can say something like that's an odd name. Let's code it. Go ahead and follow along me. So rather automatically printing our stored name, let's say if name equals to double equals to, and don't worry, this is why we are using double equals to. Like double equals to is the Python syntax for checking if something is something else. Remember, if we code names equal to a single equal to, we are setting something, we are making the name equal to and we give. But if we code double equals to like this, if name double equal to, we are checking if the name is equal to or going same as a name that we give a case of let's programming. Let's say that if the name is equal to Pratik and I'm using my own name here again, so feel free to put your own name. But let's tell Python what to do. If we give our real name, so if the name equals to Pratik, let's print the text string. Wow, that's a great name. Okay. And now let's talk to Python what if we don't give our real name. So let's make a new line, and line above we can finish with a column. This tells Python to run some code. If the code above is in true condition, it's back to our else. Let's make something new and make this time again what we do the indentation. Let's print something like not forgetting the quote marks. That's an odd name after all. If Python thinks that this line of code is true and our name equal to Pratik, this line of code will run. And if Python thinks that this line is not true, then this line of code will run. Python will use if and else to decide which of those lines of the code to run. And it won't run both of one other way. That's how we can write code to make decisions. Alright, so shall we test it out? Or let's save and run. This test with a few inputs just to make sure it's working. So what's your name? Let's use the correct name. My name is Pratik.py. Say, wow, that's a great name. Let's run again. And this time we'll give it another name. Let's say Arnav. And it will say that's odd a name. That's an odd name. Fair enough. And of course you can see if I run again, but it will only use my correct name but a lowercase p. And our code runs because lowercase p doesn't match to the uppercase p. So we are looking in our code, but looks our code is working really well so far. Let's give it a go. Save and run again, and this time we want if our condition to be true. So I'll use my real name with a capital P. And it says, wow, that's a great name, Pratik. Well, fantastic. You have just written a short Python program to chat with the user. This can be the beginning of a new chat project. Well done if you coded along with me just as you coded some Python. In my next video, I'll take you through coding in a nutshell and explore these concepts we have just used in more detail. Also introduce many more, and we'll be using Scratch as well. It's a very easy programming language. So that concludes this part 1 on Python coding for beginners.
Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next video. Please subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon for notifications of my next video.